Good evening and welcome to our Friday night Bible study. This is for Friday, March 14th, 2025. Let's see, noon on Sunday will be the middle of the month. So the months go by fast. And, well, we mentioned last week what happened the day before we recorded our Bible study last week, and that was the incident involving the internet cable to our house. We have cable internet, which means that the TV cable comes to the house and the internet signal comes in over the TV cable. And in fact, we don't subscribe to cable, just to the internet portion. Anyway, after we finished recording, another service provider, different service, stopped by and performed his service at our residence. And he was saying that the day before, he had tried to come up by our house, not that he was coming to our house, but by this way. And he was waved away because they had ladder trucks working in the area, which made me think that maybe a ladder truck went by with its boom not fully lowered, and that might be what caught our cable and yanked the box off the wall and the cable out of the pole on the other side of the street and everything else. At any rate, we were kind of hoping that having a new cable would get rid of the intermittent outages that had led us to pre-recording our Bible study and uploading it rather than doing it live as we started doing several years back. And really hope that'd be the case, that we could go live, because we have gotten the impression that people like it when we do it live. But unfortunately, I woke up yesterday morning to see the computer saying no internet connection. And in fact, I went into the office and looked at the cable modem and it was flashing, meaning that it didn't have a signal. So the intermittent outages, unfortunately, have not gone away. And, we have gone live a time or two in the past year. But we're nervous we have to do that because we know that our connection isn't as reliable as we would like. So, as far as the news, well, again, I'm into aviation news, and I heard about a plane crash. This was a private plane that crashed in Lancaster, is that the right name? Pennsylvania. Well, that really got my interest. I checked on it. It turns out that the plane had just left the Lancaster airport, and it was a particular type of airplane that is prone to having the door open in flight, or more specifically, on takeoff. It is the type of plane where you enter the plane through the right-hand door and you walk across the wing, and they actually have a special grit paint on the inside edge of the right wing for you to walk on to get to the door to get into the plane. And it is generally recommended that the pilot in the left seat close the door because he has better leverage that way to get it properly closed and latched. If it does not get quite properly latched, then it is possible that on takeoff, when the wing flexes because now it's carrying the weight of the airplane and providing lift, the door will pop open. And in fact, there was a YouTube aviator. He took a passenger with him in the exact same model of airplane, and he intentionally didn't properly latch the door to demonstrate what you're supposed to do. So, sure enough, just as the plane was beginning to lift up off the runway, the door popped open. Now, it doesn't go all the way open, but it does pop open, and there's a lot of wind, and it's distracting. But if you just ignore that and fly the airplane, it's a simple matter to go around, land, and then you can properly close the door. Apparently, what happened in this case is that the pilot got distracted trying to close the door, forgot to fly the airplane, and they crashed into a parking lot. The plane caught fire. Fortunately, nobody on the ground was injured, although some cars were destroyed in the ensuing fire. And nobody on board the aircraft died. Now, I think they were critically injured, but none of them died. One of the reasons that caught my attention is that there is a channel that I followed for a while called Rebuild Rescue. The guy who does the presenting and puts this up is the owner of a body shop called Mr. Dent in the nearby town of Mannheim, Pennsylvania. And in fact, the Lancaster Airport is the airport closest to his shop, but he wasn't using that airport. He was using one a county or so over, where he was able to rent hangar space. And what had happened was that somebody had an airplane that he hadn't used in like 15 or 20 years, and it was just sitting there tied down outside. So birds were building nests in it, and it was a mess. And this guy, the owner of this plane, who hadn't actually used it in that long, told the owner of this body shop, hey, if you can make the engines run, I'll give you the airplane. So he took that as a challenge. He did get the engines running, but then he began to rebuild the plane and eventually replaced the engines. And last I checked, the project wasn't yet complete, and the channel has come into disrepute, and he's lost, last I read anyway, he lost his hangar space at the one airport. And part of the reason for that is that he was playing around with other airplanes, buying aircraft that were damaged in a gear up landing or that kind of a thing, and getting them rebuilt and reselling them. And the owner of the plane that got him started took another plane up in a flight. There was something wrong with it. It crashed, and this guy died. So that was, kind of the beginning of the death knell, and that's what made me wonder, was this guy involved, and I haven't heard yet, in this crash there in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So, don't know yet. Strange things happen, and the news seems to be pretty negative. You've probably heard that for years now, the Tesla hate has been a thing, and people will go by and see a Tesla charging, unplug it, just to be mean to the owner. They'll drive by them in a pickup truck and roll coal, which means they'll work the accelerator in such a way as to produce a big plume of black smoke out the tailpipe of their truck, and other things like that to demonstrate that they hate Teslas. This has taken on a new cause of action. As you are probably aware, Tesla is owned by one Elon Musk, who also owns SpaceX. And Elon Musk got involved with Donald Trump and has been the head of his Department of Government Efficiency, which is, depending on your viewpoint, the Department of Massive Federal Layoffs. So now people are hating him for what he's doing as part of the Trump administration and illogically attacking Teslas to express their outrage. Doesn't make any sense. The car didn't lay off any employees. The owner of the car probably didn't lay off any employees, just the owner of the car company. Um, yeah, well, people are crazy, so. We are about to get into some of the darkest chapters in terms of human behavior in the Bible. So let's go ahead and bow our heads and we'll begin our Bible study this evening. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for the blessings that we receive from you. We thank you that we can survive for another week and that we have the opportunity and as a gift from you, the intelligence and brain power to open your word, to read it, and to ponder the meaning. But we know that mere human intelligence and power is likely to come up with the wrong ideas unless we have the blessing of the Holy Spirit. So we ask that each person who joins in this study might receive the blessing of the Spirit for them to receive what you intend for us to understand. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, another something I might point out. If you will look over my right shoulder, you will see the back of the couch that's behind me. Now, there's nothing there now, but in some of our previous videos, there was something right about there where my finger is pointing. And that was the shy cat that normally does make an appearance. I don't know if any of you actually noticed it, but my wife and I looked at one of the videos and saw the outline and the ear point of that cat. She was asleep up there for at least one of the previous videos. Another thing that I recently became aware of, we got notified by Facebook that Facebook Live posts, and I don't know if what we're putting up when we don't do it live counts, but Facebook Live posts are going to be left up for 30 days and after that taken down. So I haven't looked yet to see, maybe I'll do that at some point, if our Bible studies that are more than 30 days old are being removed. We do have everything from January of, was it January of last year? Was it January this year? I forget. Probably January. That doesn't sound right. Well, anyway, from when we started in the Old Testament, which as I recall was at the beginning of January. And unfortunately, my poor brain, it does seem a little unlikely we got clear through to 2 Samuel in just 3 months. Seems like it's more like a year and 3 months. But anyway, we are ready for 2 Samuel chapter 13. We completed the story of David and Bathsheba and of their first son who died. And we finished the story after that of David's further conquests, including the conquest of the Ammonites, over which this whole thing got started. So now we've read about David's sin. We've read about Nathan's rebuke. We did not last week get into Psalm, 51, which is the psalm explicitly stated that David wrote after he had been rebuked by Nathan. It's 51 or 52. Let me look. 51, yes. For the director of music, a psalm of David, when the prophet Nathan came to him after David had committed adultery with Bathsheba. That's the kind of the title to Psalm 51. And you're probably familiar with that, and we'll maybe talk about it more. But it is often seen as a mark of the depth of David's repentance after this thing. But repentance and confession and setting things right to the extent that you are able does not mean that the natural consequences of your actions won't still take place. And what we're about to read here will be, in a sense, a set of all those. In fact, more or less, the rest of the story is about the consequences of what happened between David and Bathsheba. So, 2 Samuel 13 starts out telling us that now David's son Absalom had a beautiful sister named Tamar, and Amnon, her half-brother, fell desperately in love with her. And that's that version's take on it. I'm going to look up the NIV here. NIV says fell in love. Let's see what the King James says. It just says that Amnon, the son of David, loved her. This isn't true love. This is not agape love. This is erotic love. This is infatuation, as we're about to see. Because love endures. Lust does not. Amnon became so obsessed with Tamar that he became ill. She was a virgin, and Amnon thought he could never have her. And again, the NIV says it seemed impossible for him to do anything to her, and the King James says Amnon thought it hard for him to do anything to her. So he wanted her, but he didn't think he could get away with anything. But Amnon had a very crafty friend, his cousin Jonadab. He was the son of David's brother Shimea. And the footnote A is going to tell us that in some cases it might ought to be spelled with an H at the end of the A. Doesn't really change how it's pronounced, so I don't know that makes a big difference. But at any rate, they footnoted that. One day Jonadab said to Amnon, "What's the trouble? Why should the son of a king look so dejected morning after morning?" Now, we read about Shimea. He was named back there in 1 Samuel, was it 16, I believe, when Samuel came to Bethlehem to anoint someone to replace Saul. And see if I can find that. Okay, so it names Eliab, and then it names Abinadab and Shammah. Okay, I don't see Shimea in there, so I'm going to waste a lot of time here looking that up. Maybe I'll do that later sometime. I don't know, Shimea might be the same as Shammah. I could look back in this version, but that'd take a lot of doing to get there. So let's just go on. The point is, it's one of David's brothers, and since David was the youngest, it would have to have been an older brother. So this Jonadab, the son of Shimea, is a cousin to David's sons, and he's crafty. He's learned the way of the world. And so he sees his cousin Amnon looking ill and dejected and in a mental state. So he asks him about it. So Amnon told him, I am in love with Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. Now, she's his half-sister as well. And of course, we read back there in 2 Samuel 3, I believe, 2 or 3, about the sons born to David at Hebron. Amnon was the firstborn, the son of Nabal's wife. Abigail was the second one, and then there were a couple of different names assigned to him. And then Absalom was the third one, and he was the son of David and a princess, the princess of, we'll see in a little bit. I'm going to get myself in trouble if I start throwing out names and don't get them right. And apparently this Tamar was his full sister, born to the same mother and father. Well, Jonadab said, I'll tell you what to do. Go back to bed and pretend you are ill. Well, it said he'd become ill, at least, the mind has influence on the body, and if you dwell on something and fret and stew over it long enough, you can actually make yourself physically ill. So it wouldn't have been a total pretend job if he was already sort of ill. When your father, that would be David, comes to see you, ask him to let Tamar come and prepare some food for you. Tell him you'll feel better if she prepares it as you watch and feeds you with her own hands. So Amnon lay down and pretended to be sick. And when the king came to see him, Amnon asked him, Please let my sister Tamar come and cook my favorite dish as I watch. There's a footnote there, footnote B. And there it says, or a couple of cakes. So, yeah, you wonder how much that's interpretation. Let's see here. Special bread is how the NIV puts it, and a couple of cakes is how the King James puts it. The point was he was going to get her to come actually into his room to prepare this meal. And there was a point to all this, obviously. So David agreed and sent Tamar to Amnon's house to prepare some food for him. When Tamar arrived at Amnon's house, she went to the place where he was lying down so he could watch her mix some dough. Then she baked his favorite dish for him. But when she set the serving tray before him, he refused to eat. Everyone get out of here, Amnon told his servants. So they all left. Now, you think about this from a practical viewpoint. I mean, it says here he has servants. I mean, he has friends, but he has servants as well. This is, it is the intrusion that early in human history of classism and ideas that some people are better than other people just by right or by birth or by whatever it is that humans use to separate themselves out. And so it had become common for the people who had influence and power and usually money, wealth, or control of wealth. I mean, the wealth just is there. It doesn't inherently belong to anybody. It's just there, and God grants it to us to supply what we need. It's human sophistry that turns it into a possession and gives some people control of more of the wealth than others. But those who have control of the wealth then think that those who don't are destined to provide for them. And so instead of doing what needs to be done around the house for themselves, they hire servants to do it for them. Now, how old were these people? It says Tamar was a virgin. And if I understand the culture of the times properly, women rarely made it much past the age of sexual maturity before they were no longer virgins. They were married out. So we're talking about teenagers here. And today we know that teenagers don't have fully developed brains. And they don't have the kind of control and rationality that we expect from adult actors. So now you've got this situation where, because of privilege and birth, you have teenagers with control of whole households and servants who are now subject to the whims of a still undeveloped brain. And so here's the situation. Probably neither Amnon nor Tamar were above the age of 20. We can't guarantee that. It doesn't say when this happened, but given everything else that will happen, it does seem that these people were still quite young at the time that all this happened. And that helps to explain the insanity of what's going on, because you're dealing with less than fully developed and therefore less than fully rational brains. So he sends everybody out. They all left. Then he said to Tamar, "Now bring the food into my bedroom and feed it to me here." So Tamar took his favorite dish to him. But as she was feeding him, he grabbed her and demanded, "Come to bed with me, my darling sister." "No, my brother," she cried. "Don't be foolish. Don't do this to me. Such wicked things aren't done in Israel. Where could I go in my shame? And you would be called one of the greatest fools in Israel. Please, just speak to the king about it and he will let you marry me." Well, she sounds a bit more rational than her older half-brother here. Although she may be speaking out of desperation. But Amnon wouldn't listen to her, and since he was stronger than she was, he raped her. And then suddenly Amnon's love turned to hate, and he hated her even more than he had loved her. "Get out of here," he snarled at her. "No, no," Tamar cried. "Sending me away now is worse than what you've already done to me." But Amnon wouldn't listen to her. He shouted for his servant and demanded, "Throw this woman out and lock the door behind her." Now, this is not out of the realm of reality possible. This is something that we might expect to have happened when it was just infatuation that attracted Amnon to his half-sister. And now that he has had his way with her and demeaned her and insulted her, now he sees her as damaged goods, even though he's the one that did the damage, and he hates her. And this is not out of the realm of reality even in our day. Men who patronize sex workers very often end up despising and hating the sex workers. And being a sex worker is a very risky occupation, because the sickest men out there who end up being serial killers very often target sex workers, specifically because of both this phenomena and because of this misguided morality in the back of their heads that they're actually doing society a favor by ridding it of these wicked women. And so, not only now has Amnon raped his half-sister, but now he's sent her away and shut her out of his house. He has humiliated her, demeaned her, devalued her, and now he's rejected her and cast her out. So the servant put her out and locked the door behind her. She was wearing a long, beautiful robe, as was the custom in those days for the king's virgin daughters. There's a footnote there on that robe, and the footnote tells us a robe with sleeves or an ornamented robe. The meaning of the Hebrew is uncertain. The point is, it was a status symbol. It indicated not only her condition as a daughter of the king, but also as a virgin. But now Tamar tore her robe and put ashes on her head, and then, with her face in her hands, she went away crying. Her brother Absalom saw her and asked, "Is it true that Amnon has been with you?" So apparently when Absalom saw her, word had already gotten out around Jerusalem, and Absalom had already heard what had happened to his sister. So now he sees her in this emotional state, and well, he thinks he knows what's up, so he asks her to confirm it. "Is it true that Amnon has been with you?" "Well, my sister, keep quiet for now, since he's your brother. Don't you worry about it." So Tamar lived as a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house. When King David heard what had happened, he was very angry. And though Absalom never spoke to Amnon about this, he hated Amnon deeply because of what he had done to his sister. Now there's a footnote D there under the saying that David was very angry. The Dead Sea Scrolls in the Greek version add, "But he did not punish his son Amnon because he loved him, for he was his firstborn." Well, there are different interpretations of it. That's one interpretation, that David just, hey, this is the crown prince. I can't exactly do much to him. The more common interpretation in our day is that, well, we kind of imagine a potential conversation between David and his oldest son Amnon. David calls him in, begins to rebuke him for having raped his half-sister. And Amnon just says, "Well, what about you and Bathsheba?" Yeah. Mm-hmm. In other words, David at this point doesn't have moral standing to deal with Amnon. Now, the right thing for him to do, no doubt, would be to disinherit him. "You are no longer considered my son. I cannot accept someone with such a degraded character as being fit to take over the throne of the nation. You may no longer succeed me as king." But it doesn't tell us he did that, and in fact, its silence suggests that he didn't do that. And the general interpretation nowadays is that he didn't because he couldn't. He didn't have moral standing. I mean, his own sin was sexual sin, so now his oldest son is involved in sexual sin. The acorn doesn't fall far from the tree, we say sometimes. And what can David do about it? If he kicks his son out as potential king, he should rightfully kick himself out as king, which he hasn't done. So now, things just sit as they are. And Absalom hates his half-brother Amnon. 2 years later, when Absalom's sheep were being sheared at Baal Hazor near Ephraim, Absalom invited all the king's sons to come to a feast. He went to the king and said, "My sheep shearers are now at work. Would the king and his servants please come to celebrate the occasion with me?" The king replied, "No, my son. If we all came, we would be too much of a burden on you." Absalom pressed him, but the king would not come, though he gave Absalom his blessing. "Well, then," Absalom said, "if you can't come, how about sending my brother Amnon with us?" "Why Amnon?" the king asked, but Absalom kept on pressing the king until he finally agreed to let all his sons attend, including Amnon. So Absalom prepared a feast fit for a king. Again, that's probably highly interpretive. They're saying that's as in the Greek and Latin versions. Compare also the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Hebrew text lacks this sentence, and that sentence being the sentence about the meal fit for a king. Now, here's something to ponder. When Absalom asks the king to send Amnon, the king asks, "Why Amnon?" And it makes you wonder. David didn't get to be king without being pretty smart. And we've read different tales regarding his intelligence. And we know he had to be highly intelligent given the Psalms that he wrote. And of course then the high regard in which he was held by the people of Israel. So he almost certainly knew that Absalom held a grudge against Amnon because of his sister. And he asks Absalom about it, but in the end, he lets Amnon and all the other king's sons go to this feast that Absalom has proposed. And you begin to wonder if maybe David was thinking, I know what Absalom might be about to do, but I'll let him do what I don't have the moral authority to do. I'll let him take care of my little problem. And so he agreed. We don't know. It doesn't say. We don't get insight into David's mindset at this point. We can only speculate based on the part of the story that is told to us. Absalom told his men, "Wait until Amnon gets drunk. Then, at my signal, kill him. Don't be afraid. I'm the one who was given the command. Take courage and do it." And this is more human sophistry, the idea that somehow we allow one person to have command over other persons, and then the commander takes the responsibility for the actions. But that's not reality. That's just human sophistry and our thinking and our, we make little statements and we think somehow our statements have weight over the reality of the physical universe around us. When you kill, you damage yourself. And so while Absalom probably will damage himself because of having given the command, he cannot transfer to himself the damage that will happen to the men who do the killing. But he's going to tell them that he's taking responsibility so they don't have to be afraid. I'm the one who was given the command, take courage and do it. So at Absalom's signal, they murdered Amnon. Then the other sons of the king jumped on their mules and fled. So they didn't, well, maybe they understood what was up and why Amnon was murdered, but if they did, they were still afraid, and fight, flight, or freeze, they all jumped on their mules and fled. As they were on the way back to Jerusalem, this report reached David. Absalom has killed all the king's sons. Not one is left alive. Now, I can guess how this message got delivered to the king. Somebody who had certain responsibilities to David was there at the place where Absalom had been shearing his sheep and having this big festival. And he saw Absalom's men kill Amnon. And he didn't wait. This was big news. He needed to get to David and deliver it. And he just made the assumption, since all the king's sons were there, that Absalom had flipped his lid and was going to kill all the king's sons. And so that's the message he delivered. And it says the king got up, tore his robe, and threw himself on the ground. His advisors also tore their clothes in horror and sorrow. But just then, Jonadab, remember that name? The son of David's brother Shimei, the one who put Amnon up to what he did to Tamar. Just then he arrived and said, "No, don't believe that all the king's sons have been killed. It was only Amnon. Absalom has been plotting this ever since Amnon raped his sister Tamar." I remember when I was in high school, one of our teachers, our choir teacher, used to talk about a catalyst. Now, a catalyst, if you're into chemistry, is a chemical that can influence a reaction of other chemicals, but does not itself really take part in that reaction. And this teacher would say that about the kind of student who would stir up trouble and then not be there when the trouble broke out. You've probably run across people like that. They're really good at getting people riled up and passing secrets and just kind of setting up trouble because they like to watch the trouble, but they don't like to be part of it. So when they sense that the trouble's about to break out, they disappear. And this teacher would call them catalysts. Well, I think that's pretty clearly the description of Jonadab here. He's gone and stirred up trouble, big trouble. And he just kind of disappeared when the trouble broke out. And he knows why Absalom hates Amnon. He knows why Absalom has been planning to kill Amnon. And apparently he has abandoned his cousin Amnon to whatever Absalom wants to do, didn't warn him, just sat back and watched the trouble happen. So now he happens by and he sees this, and so he explains to the king what's going on. Don't believe that all the king's sons have been killed. It was only Amnon. Absalom has been plotting this ever since Amnon raped his sister Tamar. No, my lord the king, your sons aren't all dead. It was only Amnon. Meanwhile, Absalom escaped. Well, he's gotten his revenge, but in the world of the time, there's such a thing as an avenger of blood. Now, he could, I suppose, have gone to a city of refuge. The problem with that is that the cities of refuge were set up to hold hearings. And if they found the person who fled to their city responsible for the death, that they had done it intentionally, then they were to give the refuge seeker over to the avenger of blood. Absalom probably knew this at this point in time. So knowing that it was with intent and with actual purpose that he killed his brother, his half-brother Amnon, he knows that a city of refuge will not avail him, and so he escapes farther away. We'll see where he went here in just a moment. Then the watchman on the Jerusalem wall saw a great crowd coming down the hill on the road from the west. He ran to tell the king, "I see a crowd of people coming from the Horonaim road along the side of the hill." And there's a footnote on that bit. As in the Greek version, the Hebrew lacks this sentence. All right. "Look," Jonadab told the king, "there they are now. The king's sons are coming, just as I said." They soon arrived, weeping and sobbing, and the king and all his servants wept bitterly with them. And David mourned many days for his son Amnon. Now, we read up there at the first part of verse 34 that Absalom escaped, but now we have to get down here to the last part of verse 37 to find out where he went. Absalom fled to his grandfather, that is his mother's dad, Talmai, son of Ammihud, the king of Geshur. He stayed there in Geshur for 3 years. And King David, now reconciled to Amnon's death, longed to be reunited with his son Absalom. So, at this point, let's review that list of sons. Amnon was the firstborn, the son of Abigail. I forget the widow of Nabal. I forget what name he's given there. He's the second, but he's going to be Nabal's heir, so he's not in the line for the throne. The third son, Absalom, is in line for the throne, but now he has killed his older brother, Amnon, and fled, but David would like now the next in line to the throne back. He wants to be reunited. And there's 2 footnotes there, G and H. The Dead Sea Scrolls in the Greek version read, "and the spirit of the king." And then H, or no longer felt a need to go out after Absalom. All right. How do the other versions put that? Because that's at the end of 13. The NIV says, "And the spirit of the king longed to go to Absalom, for he was consoled concerning Amnon's death." And we have to turn the page here in the King James Version to find the end of the chapter. It says, "And the soul of King David longed to go forth unto Absalom, for he was comforted concerning Amnon, seeing he was dead." And of course, you remember the story we read last week about that first son of Bathsheba, and how as long as he was sick, David mourned and fasted. But once he learned that the child was dead, well, okay, I thought maybe God would save him, but now that he hasn't, it's time to go on with life. So his son Amnon has died, and he's sad about it, but he has to go on with life. And part of going on with life is raising an heir to take the throne after him. And apparently, he has in mind that that be Absalom. Chapter 14. Joab realized how much the king longed to see Absalom. Now, this is one of those odd stories regarding the actions of Joab that seem, in a sense, to be out of character for him. But we can imagine a selfish motive for what he's about to do. Namely, he may have some ties to Absalom, and he wants, apparently, he's probably younger than David because he's the son of David's sister. He wants a job once David moves on, and maybe he thinks Absalom is the way to get there. At any rate, here's what he does. He sent for a woman from Tekoa who had a reputation for great wisdom. He said to her, "Pretend you are in mourning, wear mourning clothes, and don't put on lotions. Act like a woman who's been mourning for the dead for a long time. Then go to the king and tell him the story I am about to tell you." And then Joab told her what to say. There was a footnote there, and the footnote A says, don't anoint yourself with oil. Don't do the things that women traditionally did in those times, because trying to hide the aging process is something that women have been doing probably since the days of Eve. Certainly they had different things they could do for themselves back then. So Joab tells this woman what to say. So when the woman from Tekoa approached the king, footnote B, as in many Hebrew manuscripts and the Greek and Syriac versions, the Masoretic text reads "spoke to." All right, so there's different readings out there. Excuse me. When the woman from Tekoa approached the king, she bowed with her face to the ground in deep respect and cried out, "Oh, king, help me." "What's the trouble?" the king asked. "Alas, I am a widow," she replied. "My husband is dead. My 2 sons had a fight out in the field, and since no one was there to stop it, one of them was killed. Now the rest of the family is demanding, 'Let us have your son. We will execute him for murdering his brother.'" The avenger of blood on steroids here. "He doesn't deserve to inherit his family's property. They want to extinguish the only coal I have left, and my husband's name and family will disappear from the face of the earth." Now this might seem like a little bit of a contrived story until we recall the rules that the people lived under and the culture of the time. If a man's son died before he had children, then the man's next son was to marry the widow and have children in place of the son. And the idea of that was that the land did not pass from the family. Whatever was assigned to the family stayed with that family in perpetuity. Of course, then it's important to have an heir to take the property and maintain the family's claim on the property. And so what this woman is saying, she says, "My husband died, I'm a widow. Well, then my boys got out in the field. Dad wasn't there to stop them. They got into a fight, and one of them killed the other one. And now the people of the town want me to release the other son to them so they can kill him, execute him for the murder of his brother. And if they do, there won't be any heirs left to maintain the family property." Now, that story came from Joab. Smart guy. Although the woman may have helped to embellish the story or make it more believable, given her wisdom. "Leave it to me," the king told her. "Go home, and I'll see to it that no one touches him." "Oh, thank you, my lord the king," the woman from Tekoa replied. "If you are criticized for helping me, let the blame fall on me and on my father's house, and let the king and his throne be innocent." "If anyone objects," the king said, "bring him to me. I can assure you he will never harm you again." Now that's quite a threat coming from King David, who can tell his men, "Take him out," and they do it. And then she said, "Please swear to me by the Lord your God that you won't let anyone take vengeance against my son. I want no more bloodshed." As surely as the Lord lives, he replied, not a hair on your son's head will be disturbed. Please allow me to ask one more thing of my lord the king, she said. Go ahead and speak, he responded. She replied, why don't you do as much for the people of God as you have promised to do for me? You have convicted yourself in making this decision because you have refused to bring home your own banished son. All of us must die eventually. Our lives are like water spilled out on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. But God does not just sweep life away. Instead, he devises ways to bring us back when we have been separated from him. And one wonders if some of this is not the wisdom of this woman of Tekoa, and not just what Joab had told her to say. Reading on, because she has more to say. I have come to plead with my lord the king because people have threatened me. I said to myself, perhaps the king will listen to me and rescue us from those who would cut us off from the inheritance God has given us. And the inheritance, see there's a footnote, the property or the people. Well, if there isn't a proper heir to the throne, then there's the threat that surrounding nations in this violent age will come around and dispossess them of the land, take the land for themselves. And so she is suggesting that without the king's heir there to take over after the king, that the whole nation is in danger. Perhaps the king will listen to me and rescue us from those who would cut us off from the inheritance God has given us. Yes, my lord the king will give us peace of mind again. I know that you are like an angel of God in discerning good from evil. May the Lord your God be with you. And obviously at this point, given what I'm about to read, David has kind of figured out what's going on here. I must know one thing, the king replied, and tell me the truth. Raise your right hand and swear. I swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. In fact, some courts these days leave out that bit about the whole truth, which I think is entirely appropriate, because very often in pretrial proceedings, the courts decide that certain truth will not be told to the jury. And so if you as the witness try to say it, they're going to tell you to shut up. So they don't want you to tell the whole truth. And it would be ridiculous in an American court to swear to tell the whole truth. So judges that say swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, well, you haven't sworn to tell the whole truth, so if they tell you to shut up, you're not violating your oath by shutting up. At any rate, that's one of my little pet peeves. So the king orders this woman to tell the truth. Yes, my lord the king, she responded. Did Joab put you up to this? David apparently knew his nephew better than his nephew thought he was known. Because David listens to this story, he hears this bit about Absalom, and things begin to click in his head. And, I see what's up. Huh. Did Joab put you up to this? And the woman replied, my lord the king, how can I deny it? Nobody can hide anything from you. Yes, Joab sent me and told me what to say. He did it to place the matter before you in a different light. But you are as wise as an angel of God, and you understand everything that happens among us. Well, that's just plain old regular flattery, but that's how you did before royalty in those days. So, in fact, I guess where there's still royalty in the world today, that's what you do to royalty. You butter them up. You flatter them. You may not mean it at all, but you flatter them because that's what's expected. That's the social norms and the way we do things around here. So the king sent for Joab and told him, "All right, go and bring back the young man Absalom." Joab bowed with his face to the ground in deep respect and said, "At last I know that I have gained your approval, my lord the king, for you have granted me this request." Then Joab went to Geshur and brought Absalom back to Jerusalem. But the king gave this order: "Absalom may go to his own house, but he must never come into my presence." So apparently, Absalom held a grudge and dealt with it. Now David's holding a grudge. And okay, if you think Absalom needs to come back, well, I'll let him come back, but don't you dare ever let me see him. This is a very strict no contact provision. He has blocked Absalom. Don't come into my presence. And he has a whole lot of people surrounding him who, because he's the king, will carry out what he wants. Now, Absalom was praised as the most handsome man in all Israel. You might think that Absalom was David on steroids, in a sense. The young women fell head over heels over David. And now Absalom is outshining his dad when it comes to being handsome. He was flawless, it says, from head to foot. He cut his hair only once a year, and then only because it was so heavy. When he weighed it out, it came to 5 pounds. Footnote D, the 200 shekels, or 2.3 kilograms, by the royal standard. So, yeah, it's a lot of hair. I certainly don't have 5 pounds of hair, even as long as I've let it grow out. A few ounces at the most. He had 3 sons and 1 daughter. His daughter's name was Tamar, and she was very beautiful. So now there are 2 Tamars in the household, because recall that Absalom's sister lived in disgrace in her brother's house because she was no longer a virgin, but she couldn't marry because nobody would have her. She was damaged goods. That's the ludicrous nature of human sexual mores. Absalom lived in Jerusalem for 2 years, but he never got to see the king. Well, of course not. The king had blocked him. The king wasn't going to let him come see him. So Absalom lived there for 2 years, never got to see his father. Then Absalom sent for Joab to ask him to intercede for him. But Joab refused to come. Now, recall, earlier in this chapter, Joab has hired this woman from Tekoa to come and convince David to let Absalom come back to Jerusalem. But apparently, during the 2 years after that, something happened between Absalom and Joab, and now Joab isn't willing to stand up for Absalom. And maybe that has to do with David's blocking Absalom and refusing to let him come see it. So Joab succeeded in getting Absalom brought back to Jerusalem, but he failed at getting Absalom and David reconciled and reunited. And now he's apparently had second thoughts about the entire enterprise. So now that Absalom wants him to come and help him get into the king's presence to actually talk to the king, Joab doesn't want to have anything to do with it. Absalom sent for him a second time, but again, Joab refused to come. So Absalom said to his servants, "Go and set fire to Joab's barley field, the field next to mine." So they set his field on fire as Absalom had commanded. Let's get his attention. Let's do something to make him angry enough to overcome his reticence to come see me. Then Joab came to Absalom at his house and demanded, "Why did your servant set my field on fire?" Well, Exactly, because that's how I got you to come talk to me, huh? You did exactly what I expect you to do when I did it. That's why I set your field on fire. And Absalom replied, because I wanted you to ask the king why he brought me back from Geshur if he didn't intend to see me. I might as well have stayed there. Let me see the king. If he finds me guilty of anything, then let him kill me. Well, I mean, Absalom obviously knows why David's mad at him, why David holds a grudge, and he's playing bravado here. If he wants to kill me, then let him kill me. Well, I don't know if he's really that far, but he'll say it that way anyway. So Joab told the king what Absalom had said. Then at last David summoned Absalom, who came and bowed low before the king, and the king kissed him. So finally, father and son have been reunited, and the oldest surviving son of David, now the obvious crown prince, get the right term out here in a moment, and David have been reunited. So now maybe it's possible that Absalom will be the next king after David. Next chapter. After this, Absalom bought a chariot and horses, and he hired 50 bodyguards to run ahead of him. He got up early every morning and went out to the gate of the city. When people brought a case to the king for judgment, Absalom would ask where in Israel they were from, and they would tell him their tribe. Then Absalom would say, "You've really got a strong case here. It's too bad the king doesn't have anyone to hear it. I wish I were the judge. Then everyone could bring their cases to me for judgment, and I would give them justice." Now one wonders how much he heard from these people. I mean, these are people who have left their homesteads, left their living, left their family to travel to Jerusalem to bring their case before the king as the final arbiter of justice in the nation. Well, clearly, if they would go to that much trouble, they thought they were in the right. It doesn't mean they were, just they thought they were in the right. And Absalom talks to them, and how much he hears of what they have to say, I don't know. It doesn't tell us. But he kind of butters them up. Yeah, you've got a strong case here. I wish I were the judge. I'd give you what you want. He doesn't say it exactly that way, but he's saying, I'd like a little bit more authority. I would like to begin taking some of the role of my father David. Now, this element of the story is important, not only because of what Absalom is doing, but for us to properly understand the role of the king, and therefore to properly understand what happens at the beginning of Solomon's reign. Yeah, Solomon, not Absalom. Of course, you already knew that probably, but these issues will come up again in the story of Solomon. But here Absalom is saying, I would like to be the king's deputy. I would like to be able to take over some of the caseload from him so that when cases come into the city for judgment, I could help him decide them. When people tried to bow before him, Absalom wouldn't let them. Instead, he took them by the hand and kissed them. Absalom did this with everyone who came to the king for judgment, and so he stole the hearts of all the people of Israel. Now, let's look at the timing here, because this is this is going to be helpful in understanding everything that's going on here. So we had Amnon's rape of Tamar. Then we had 2 years, and Absalom arranges for Amnon to be killed. Well, then he runs away to grandfather's house, and he stays there for 3 years. So now we've got 5. Then Joab manages to get him brought back to Jerusalem, but then he spends 2 years in Jerusalem without seeing the king. So that's 2 on top of the 5. Now we've got 7 years. And finally now he gets to see the king, and then he begins this campaign of trying to supplant David in the hearts of all the people of Israel. And now it says after 4 years. So we had 7 years up to the rapprochement between David and Absalom. Now we've got another 4 years. So now we're up to 11 years. And I say that in part to say how early in the story it must have been when Amnon raped Tamar. Because that was 11 years ago now. After 4 years, Absalom said to the king, "Let me go to Hebron," remember that was David's old capital, "to offer a sacrifice to the Lord and fulfill a vow I made to him. For while your servant was at Geshur in Aram, I promised to sacrifice to the Lord in Hebron if he would bring me back to Jerusalem." So we just read over 2 footnotes there, so let's scroll down and find those. Footnote A, as in the Greek and Syriac versions, the Hebrew reads 40 years. Well, that seems unlikely since David only reigned for approximately 40 years. So yeah, the Greek and Syriac versions are probably more accurate. Why the Hebrew reads the way it does, who knows? And then in the next verse, as in some Greek manuscripts, the Hebrew lacks "in Hebron." Well, he wants to do it in Hebron, and there's some very significant symbology to using Hebron. Whether or not he said that later on, he had said it earlier, because he's telling David that he wants to go to Hebron. Whether or not the promise that he made involved Hebron, I don't think it particularly matters. In fact, it may not have been. It may not have been. He might be lying here. He might not have made any such promise at all. But he does want to go to Hebron, and there's important symbols in going to Hebron. And Absalom, by this point, well, he's third-born son of the king, probably not more than a year younger than Amnon, and probably even less than that. So he's more developed now after these 11 years. And this is 11 years after his brother had reached sexual maturity. So we know it was at least that much. Let's say boys reach sexual maturity at 14 or 15. Let's just say 15. So we had 11 to 15. We got 26 years. So Absalom's now probably an adult with a more fully developed brain. He's smart, and he's got political savvy, and he's been able to steal the hearts of the people of Israel over the last 4 years. He's used his physical appearance and his charm. Now he wants to go to Hebron. And the king says, "Okay, go to Hebron, fulfill your vow." So Absalom went to Hebron, but while he was there, he sent secret messengers to all the tribes of Israel to stir up a rebellion against the king. Excuse me. "As soon as you hear the ram's horn," his message read, "you are to say, 'Absalom has been crowned king in Hebron.' He took 200 men from Jerusalem with him as guests, but they knew nothing of his intentions." While Absalom was offering the sacrifices, he sent for Ahithophel, one of David's counselors who lived in Gilo. Soon many others also joined Absalom, and the conspiracy gained momentum. Now, we talked last week about this Ahithophel. I don't remember if we talked about him by name. Ahithophel is the father of Eliam, one of David's generals. Eliam is the father of Bathsheba, with whom David had an illicit alliance, and for whom he had another one of his generals, Uriah the Hittite, killed by the hands of the Ammonites. So this is the Ahithophel that Absalom has sent for. And I don't suppose any of you could imagine why Ahithophel might have an axe to grind regarding David, huh? Or, as we said at the outset, what we're reading here is a series of natural consequences for David's mistake, his sin, if you wish. His sin, the adultery with Bathsheba, but then the added sin of murder in service of a cover-up. And apparently it didn't work because it appears that pretty much everybody knew what had happened. So, Ahithophel comes. We'll read more about him as it goes on here, but we see that he's coming now, and we have a sense of why Ahithophel is joining with Absalom, and the conspiracy begins to gain momentum. A messenger soon arrived in Jerusalem to tell David, all Israel has joined Absalom in a conspiracy against you. Then we must flee at once, or it will be too late, David urged his men. Hurry, if we get out of the city before Absalom arrives, both we and the city of Jerusalem will be spared from disaster. In other words, David doesn't want to fight it out in the city of Jerusalem. Too many innocent lives caught in the crossfire. He wants to get out of the city and deal with this insurrection, this rebellion by his son, someplace else. Out in the open fields, where only the combatants will die and not so many innocent civilians. That's the typical line of thinking of people who are caught up in the violence of war, and we talk about that to this day. We despise the people who will put their armament stores underneath hospitals to prevent them from being destroyed by the enemy, or using human shields, as we put. We despise those people, but they do that because they need every advantage they can get against the wealth-controlling nations of the world. So David says, we got to get out of here. We are with you, his advisors replied. Do what you think is best. So the king and all his household set out at once. He left no one behind except 10 of his concubines to look after the palace. Then the king and all his people set out on foot, pausing at the last house to let all the king's men move past to lead the way. There were 600 men from Gath who had come with David along with the king's bodyguard. Footnote C on the word bodyguard there, the Kerethites and Pelethites. All right. Then the king turned and said to Ittai, a leader of the men from Gath, why are you coming with us? Go on back to King Absalom, for you are a guest in Israel, a foreigner in exile. You arrived only recently, remember Gath? That's the city where David lived, and then the men of Gath didn't like it, so the king of Gath gave David the city of Ziklag. Now they're supporting David, and they've come with him. But David says, go back to Absalom. You're a guest. You're a foreigner. You only arrived here recently. And should I force you today to wander with us? I don't even know where we'll go. Go on back and take your kinsman with you, and may the Lord show you his unfailing love and faithfulness. footnote D. The Hebrew reads, and may unfailing love and faithfulness go with you. Well, okay, exact wording may not be that important. He's wishing them well. But Idai said to the king, I vow by the Lord and by your own life that I will go wherever my lord the king goes, no matter what happens, whether it means life or death. David replied, all right, come with us. So Idai and all his men and their families went along. Everyone cried loudly as the king and his followers passed by. They crossed the Kidron Valley and then went out toward the wilderness. Zadok and all the Levites also came along, carrying the Ark of the Covenant of God. They set down the Ark of God, and Abiathar offered sacrifices until everyone had passed out of the city. Footnote E, Abiathar went up. Well, whether or not he offered sacrifices, he was there. So both the descendant of Eli and another descendant of Aaron named Zadok have shown up here. All the Levites along with them, and they brought the ark. Then the king instructed Zadok to take the ark of God back into the city. If the Lord sees fit, David said, he will bring me back to see the ark and the tabernacle again. Footnote F, and his dwelling place. All right. But if he is through with me, then let him do what seems best to him. The king also told Zadok the priest, look, here is my plan. You and Abiathar, footnote H, the Hebrew lacks and Abiathar, but compare 15:29, so he'll be involved. I mean, we did read about Abiathar already. Return quietly to the city with your son Ahimaaz and Abiathar's son Jonathan. I will stop at the shallows of the Jordan River and wait there for a report from you. So Zadok and Abiathar took the ark of God back to the city and stayed there. So now we've got Zadok and Ahimaaz, his son, Abiathar and Jonathan, his son, two high priests serving in Jerusalem. David sends the ark back to Jerusalem with them, and he says, let's use your sons. Your sons can run messages for us. So I will stop at the shallows of the Jordan River and wait there for a report from you. Footnote I on Jordan River at the crossing points of the wilderness. So Zadok and Abiathar took the ark of God back to the city and stayed there. David walked up the road to the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head was covered and his feet were bare as a sign of mourning. And the people who were with him covered their heads and wept as they climbed the hill. When someone told David that his advisor Ahithophel was now backing Absalom, David prayed, "O Lord, let Ahithophel give Absalom foolish advice." Well, that doesn't seem likely, given what we're about to know about Ahithophel, but let's read on. When David reached the summit of the Mount of Olives, where people worshiped God, Hushai the Archite was waiting there for him. Hushai had torn his clothing and put dirt on his head as a sign of mourning. But David told him, "If you go with me, you will only be a burden. Return to Jerusalem and tell Absalom, I will now be your advisor, O king, just as I was your father's advisor in the past. Then you can frustrate and counter Ahithophel's advice." Now we could take this in a number of ways, and I'm going to present one way here, but you might want to think of it in another way. A little earlier, David prayed, we read that in verse 31, "O Lord, let Ahithophel give Absalom foolish advice." It's right there near the top of the screen now. But now he's seen an opportunity to try to take care of the matter himself, and so he takes this action. He runs into Hushai the Archite, and he wants Hushai to go to Jerusalem and pretend to join Absalom in his rebellion, but his goal is to negate the advice of Ahithophel. Zadok and Abiathar the priests will be there. Tell them about the plans being made in the king's palace, and they will send their sons Ahimaaz and Jonathan to tell me what is going on. So David's friend Hushai returned to Jerusalem, getting there just as Absalom arrived. Hell, we have reached the middle of a highly suspenseful story. Unless, of course, you know what's going to happen, but still, here we are in the middle of it, and we've about reached the end of our usual time for our Bible study. And in fact, I think this is a good place for us to quit. Now, understand that there's going to be more drama going on here involving Ahimaaz and Jonathan. In fact, Ahimaaz will have intrigue right almost to the end of this story. And Hushai and Ahithophel are going to be involved there. And, well, all this will play out as we continue through this story. But for now, seeing as we've run out of time, I think we need to go ahead and wrap this up and just plan to continue this story and the book of 2 Samuel next week. And it looks like we've done 3 chapters this week, 13, 14, and 15. So we'll pick up with chapter 17 and continue this story next week when we again do our Friday night Bible study. And until then, we wish you well and say goodbye and God bless.